Blog post number 2 by JC Andrijeski, author of the Allie's War series, as part of the Shield Allie's War Book 2 book tour. Hi, my name is JC Andrijeski, and I'm pleased to be appearing today on PW Creighton's site as part of the Paranormal Perceptions series, which is a very cool series that basically looks at different paranormal creatures and the universes they inhabit and sort of their origin stories, where they came from, and why the author chose to write about them. So I will be doing that. So what are the creatures of the Allie's War series? They're actually the Seers. Essentially what they are is they're a lot like human beings. They look like human beings. They're pretty hard to distinguish from them just visually, although there are some traits physiologically that can be picked out. They tend to have very strange eye colors compared to humans, some of them very dramatic. They tend to be taller than most humans. They tend to have more angular features. And I'm starting to try to impart just kind of a quality to them in terms of the way they move. They have different mannerisms. They tend to move more fluidly. Anyone who's read the books knows they're kind of considered hypersexual, and they actually have some biological basis for this. They need a lot of contact compared to human beings, and some of this has to do with their highly integrated society, and some of it has to do with their actual physiology. Not all of that's physical contact. They're psychic. So a lot of this contact occurs from their mind, but they can be trained to do everything from push people into behaving in ways they wouldn't normally behave, push them into believing things or thinking things had happened that hadn't actually happened. They can erase memories. They can obviously speak to one another from mind to mind. They can create a lot of suggestions in people's minds. They can be trained as assassins, remote viewers, so they can look at things that happen a very long distance away in the barriers. So despite all the abilities that the Seers have, they actually are a conquered race in this world that I've created. And that's sort of complicated, but essentially has to do with the fact that when they're first discovered by the humans, they're extremely peaceful. And so before they develop any sort of warlike mentality, they've already kind of been taken over by human beings. And it's also has to do with the fact that they create technology that allows humans to control their abilities and actually to collar them and own them in a sense, so that most seers that live among humans, in fact, legally are required to have an owner of some kind. They kind of try to loophole it and say it's not slavery. Like they say they own the seer's powers without actually owning the seer, as a way to kind of talk around the slavery aspect, but really this is just sort of a legal fiction that allows them to own the seers themselves. So the world that Allie's in, actually seers are very much sort of living underground in a lot of ways. When they are in the human world, there's sort of a split way in which the ones that are the most visible actually have human owners, but there's a whole kind of underground of seers that aren't owned, that are living under the radar, that actually have quite a bit of influence, power, and say over what is going on in the human world. So even within the overt power dynamics, there's a lot of contradictions, and there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that actually really calls into question who's really running the society, because many seers have allied with some of the most powerful humans for various reasons. And so actually the world is fairly complicated in terms of power dynamics. The seers are both powerless and kind of the puppet masters. As far as the origins of the seers themselves, gosh, they're kind of, I think they're just kind of a composite of a whole bunch of different things that I was reading and studying over the years, and from traveling and everything else. One of the things that kind of probably stem from some of it is I spent quite a bit of time in India among Buddhist areas that were also heavily Hindu in some places, and they had very different views of some of the stuff. I mean, the whole idea of psychic abilities obviously has a really long history in terms of many different cultures have talked about that in terms of spiritual mystics and all that kind of thing. So, but they all have very different takes on it. And the Buddhists I actually found kind of interesting in that they view it as almost a liability to have these abilities. The Tibetan Buddhists anyway, I don't know about all the different forms of Buddhism. But they see it as almost like a test, like something that, like the kind of with great power comes great responsibility kind of thing. So they see it as something that's actually sort of difficult in terms of maintaining what they consider a pure Buddhist path. They see having these kind of abilities as actually something that would make your path more difficult. Whereas Hindus almost view it as exactly the opposite. They see these powers as like a sign that you've been kind of gifted with something extra, and that, actually that's a sign that you're spiritually advanced in some way. So I guess I kind of played around with both of those ideas. Like this, it's really, I don't know, it's kind of a unique challenge in a way to create a new mythology, because you don't really have that whole background of different takes on it. Like vampires. Like people have done vampires in 100 different ways. Really, in some ways, I had to create something that had that feeling of weight to it that a real myth does, that has lasted the test of time. I had to make it feel like something that had something pretty intense behind it without that actual history being there, which is pretty tough. And yeah, if you want something to have that ring of authenticity and create a world that people feel like they're really inhabiting, then you have to spend some time thinking about the details, even if most of those details are never going to make it into one of the actual books. So yeah, but luckily for me, that kind of thing is fun. So it wasn't a chore to do that. It just took a long time. Anyway, so this is the end of this post, and thanks for joining for this installment of Paranormal Perceptions, and also for this leg of the Shield Allie's War Book 2 tour. I hope you got something out of my incessant babbling, and that it was remotely interesting. And yeah, sign up for the giveaway. There's a lot of cool prizes, and thanks for coming along. Hope to see you on some more legs of the tour. One final thing, I felt like the fact that I put no pictures of really inactive monkeys on this blog post actually might disappoint some of you. I'm not sure why it would, but anyway, here is one more little snippet of extremely languid monkeys.